You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. All right, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Public Comment. And we're talking a lot about what's been happening with DPD and ICE. I am Khary Frazier here, and we talk a lot from the man I'm about to introduce. Malachi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. We've been on a bit of a summer hiatus as things have been busy and taking up our time, but we've been reporting all the way through. So I'm glad to bring some of that back to the people here.
Most definitely. Along with you, we have Thomaesa Bailey. Thomaesa, how are you today?
Doing great. Glad to be back in the studio. Glad to be back on Public Comment. As Malachi said, we've been on summer break. I've been busy. I've been traveling. I've been doing a lot of political stuff since this is campaign season. So just happy to be back in the studio, back talking to our listeners.
All right. So today we're picking up with a story that's right off in Bridge Detroit. Everyone was watching Detroit Police Department and ICE raids throughout the city of Detroit, especially what was doing a lot of activists. Detroit Will Breathe was there and many others. Monday morning, 7100 block of Alaska Avenue, the incident, federal agents attempted to detain undocumented resident Marcos Fabian Arita. Bautista, I may be enunciating that wrong. Protesters intervened. DPD deployed for crowd control. Arrests were made and people were pepper sprayed. Malachi, you wrote this. You were covering a lot of this. What was happening here?
Yeah, so I think this situation, we have seen ICE, more present in Detroit over the start of the year. Conducting targeted raids, it seems like enforcement activities, scooping up people that they have come across. This person apparently had been deported twice already and made it back into the country. He was pleaded guilty to some kind of minor traffic offenses, basically in Pennsylvania back in 2022, driving without a license or insurance. And this was in Pennsylvania. And then ICE found out that he was in Detroit in June and had been tracking him. Apparently there was a traffic stop where they tried to pull him over. He fled. He made it to this home on the west side. Not really clear what the relationship is there between him and the family that was living in the home. But it was under ICE surveillance. So they brought in, they got a federal warrant signed by a judge and brought in a multi-agency team of police, including the ATF, FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and ICE. And as they attempted to execute that search warrant, a group of protesters showed up. Some of them, were just neighbors in the neighborhood. Others, like Detroit Will Breathe and Assembla Popular Detroit, which has been opposing ICE activities across the city, also came and documented the event over video. I wasn't actually there in person. I had been alerted in the morning that this was going on. And it kind of took place over the course of about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So it was over fairly quickly before I was able to get over there. But essentially, the protesters tried to get in between the federal agents that were executing the search warrant and the home, and were demanding to see the search warrant. We've been told that it was not produced, and so that may have been part of the reason that protesters were more adamant in trying to stop this situation. The feds said that they have one, but apparently the homeowner didn't see the actual search warrant either. And then as they removed the man, one protester drove their truck and tried to block I think it was a federal vehicle. There's part of the video, and I think there's screenshots in our reporting as well, show that that image there. That they had tried to kind of basically T-bone the car to stop it from going. So that person was arrested and charged with federal obstruction. Another person was arrested for allegedly banging a metal pipe on an ATF vehicle. If you watch the videos, you can hear people banging on like Home Depot buckets with pipes, and so police said that those were basically weapons that people were carrying. And yeah, DPD was called in to keep the peace, as they've stated, to basically keep protesters from interfering with the ICE operation, and that is what has kind of spilled into Tuesday's council session and raised additional questions about whether this constitutes DPD getting involved in immigration enforcement. Basically, we have been told through much of the year, as immigration enforcement has stepped up, under the Trump administration, that DPD was not getting involved, that it wasn't their responsibility to conduct immigration enforcement activities. And there are folks who feel like DPD arriving on scene to basically handle protesters, helped facilitate the ICE raid, or whatever you want to call the situation. So that's kind of where we are now. I think there's a lot of questions still outstanding about how DPD can be called in, what limitations there are on, what they're able to do in policy, and kind of what this means moving forward. If we're going to continue to see large, like, civil resistance to federal agents, will DPD continually be called in to basically stand between the public and those federal agents? And how does that align with what people kind of expect from their police department? I think that's the thread that we've been following.
And as you talk about that thread that you've been following, the other point that I definitely want to uplift in these questions is you talk policy. Our policy person here, Thomaesa, and a lot of questions just unpacking about the role of federal government to a municipal government and that relationship, because we're really looking at that. So is DPD enforcing immigration? Those are the questions. DPD is not in the business of immigration. That was uplifted before. Resident response, has been, it's a lot that people are not understanding as residents. As you spoke to what was happening in public comment at City Council yesterday, and the presence of DPD enabled ICE, that has been one of the criticisms that has been uplifted around this. So, Thomaesa, what are some of those policy questions that people should be having right now?
Yeah, so some of the questions have already been raised, right? What is DPD's role? If DPD is there on the scene, are they helping? Is that considered helping? Is that considered facilitating? Or are they there to keep the peace, right? So I think we need to take a step back. For me, it's always about political education and finding those education moments. This is a federalism question, right? ICE, Homeland Security, the FBI, these are all federal agencies. These are all agencies of our national government who have been called into a local municipality to do their job within a local system, right? So when you go into a local municipality, those municipalities have local law enforcement there. That would be DPD. DPD is a local government. It is part of our local government. It is our local law enforcement. So how do those two entities work together? If a federal agency goes into a municipality, one of the things that they are entitled to do is call the local police if there are local people, citizens of that city there doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I'm not sure if that's what happened here, if DPD was called in. I think, Khary, earlier you said that the FBI actually called DPD to come to the scene because there were Detroit citizens, the protesters or whoever that were there that were doing things. And so I think that, I don't know that qualifies as DPD helping with the ICE raid, but to certain onlookers and people on the outside looking in, it seems as if that they were. But if they were there to execute keeping of the peace activity and saying like, okay, these are our citizens, we're trying to keep them safe, we're trying to keep them out of the way of ICE, we're trying to stop protesters from doing things that would be considered criminal, if there were any other type of situation going on. It just so happens that ICE is an agency that people have a negative connotation with. But if there wasn't ICE there, if they were just there doing these things, maybe DPD would be called in anyway. And so that kind of is where the questions lie. So what activities does DPD take place that shows that they are helping ICE? Or are they just there executing their normal activities of what they would be doing anyway if someone had called the police, right? And so I think what it makes people confused because ICE is there and DPD is there, and we see these videos, and it's a lot of police activity, and we definitely don't want that to happen. You know, Detroit is not a sanctuary city, but it is a welcoming city. And the spoken policy of our elected officials has been that DPD will not facilitate anything that ICE is doing. But DPD does also have jurisdiction over criminal activities that take place inside the city of Detroit. So they are going to be in places where activities like that are taking place. So for citizens and onlookers, we need to be thinking about what is DPD's role? Why are they there? And I'm by no means, an apologist for law enforcement at all. But I think we have to think about those kinds of things. And I agree that DPD should not be assisting, facilitating, helping, or doing anything in trying to assist ICE. However, if they are there executing their responsibilities, then they do have a means of being on the scene. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So as you talk about that means of being on the scene, the other questions definitely come, what's happening in council? And we definitely know Council Member Santiago Romero has been very active in speaking about everything that's happening on a national basis, but especially what's happening here in the city of Detroit. You were there because you're always there. Hence, that's how the Notebook comes to life, Malachi. What was the tone in council yesterday regarding this?
Yeah, I kind of expected Councilmember Santiago Romero to be a little bit more aggressive. I think so yeah, this has happened before. It's happened with Cinco de Mayo protests that were shut down. It's happened, around the fireworks when we have incidents. It's happened, when there's been shootings at block parties. DPD usually sends in an assistant chief to brief the council on what they're doing and answer questions. Santiago Romero, her questioning was mainly focused around the search warrant and whether the issue is, DPD is the one answering these questions, and it wasn't, ICE or any of the federal agencies there. So Assistant Chief Fitzgerald said that DPD policy is to show a search warrant. The feds, once they have one signed by the judge, there doesn't seem to really be an obligation that they have to produce that to you, although that runs counter to the training that folks have been getting. Some of the trainings even facilitated by Councilmember Santiago Romero. These kind of know your rights workshops that recommend people not open the door for ICE unless they see a warrant. There's also concern about the heavy and heavily armed response. She said that this whole situation really was avoidable at the end of the day if they would have shown up with a warrant and if they would have not been masked and, in such large numbers, heavily armed. It wouldn't have freaked so many people out in the neighborhood, basically, that this could have been done in a much more calm way. And I think that is part of what we're seeing. This, there was a caller who called into the meeting, a Detroit resident who lived in the area, and said that we were trying to stop masked men from abducting our neighbors, basically. And so when you look out your window and you see a group of people wearing masks and you try to find out why they're there and they, seemingly won't tell you, I think that's why you're seeing people so willing to put their bodies, between federal agents and the people that they are trying to protect. So yeah, council members did request the body camera footage. It's important to note, I didn't say earlier, that DPD pepper sprayed several of the protesters. In watching the video, it looked like they were pepper sprayed to keep them away from DPD vehicles as they rolled off from the scene. We were initially told that DPD made the arrest of the two people, but it turns out that they basically apprehended those folks and then they were arrested by federal agents and charged with federal crimes. At least one person was. The other might be released. We're trying to figure out exactly still what's going on there. But yeah, the tone is basically, we're trying to find out more about what happened. Show us the body camera footage to determine whether DPD's response was appropriate. But there didn't seem to be any particular pushback from council members that DPD shouldn't have been there at all. That mostly came from residents who, again, don't really see the distinction between DPD arriving to keep the peace when you have, look, the person driving the car, that could have been a dangerous situation. They were driving, next to a crowd and could have hit a vehicle. So, DPD says we were there to try to keep the situation safe. But again, folks feel like they were facilitating this immigration enforcement by arresting protesters and pepper spraying them.
Yeah, it's so unique because that same role of relationship. So the police officers, as Thomaesa was bringing up, that's a closer relationship than many of these agencies, because it's a lot of agencies. You said the ATF, the FBI, Border Patrol. So you would think to yourself, okay, with this many agencies, a situation should be able to be handled in that respects from those agencies alone. But now, who represents those residents that are present? And I guess that representation in public safety falls and bears the responsibility of the officers. And I'm definitely similar to how Thomaesa uplifted, and I'm coming right back to you, Thomaesa, in reference to this. I'm not by any means given passing the olive branch to the police department in reference to this, but more so just in the macro, just looking at the functionality. And it reminds me so much of another video that will be released this week through Detroit is Different about the shooting death of Mr. Sherman Lee Butler that was being evicted last year, not far from the Palmer Park community. And it's a bailiff, Wayne County bailiff, evicting someone with support of the police. And you talk about the body camera footage, and that body camera footage right now through the Coalition for Police Transparency, they're asking for, and transparency and accountability, they're asking for a 7-day notice of all body camera footage to be released afterwards. And if not, it'll extend to 30 days. So 37 days, no matter what. With Sherman Lee Butler's shooting, it was a lot of pushback from the Wayne County prosecutor of Kim Worthy saying that sometimes it's open investigations. What's this relationship as far as like you see this community response to move towards policy, Thomaesa, and structures and systems are saying these are policies that'll change the functionality of people. So that's kind of a loose elements of a question that I'm coming to, but more so, how do you balance this out so people are empowered, but also systems are, like, I guess, I don't want to say intact per se, but functioning in the best interest of people as well?
That's an excellent question, because the policy is really where the rubber meets the road. Like, we're asking now, what is the policy of DPD as it relates to ICE raids in our city? We don't necessarily have anything written down. We just know that DPD is not supposed to be helping or facilitating. That's kind of what people have articulated. In this situation, as it relates to body cameras, it's kind of the same thing, right? You have two different governments, even though they're both local governments, Wayne County and DPD, working together to do something that is the county government's responsibility. Eviction is on the county government, right? So the county sheriff is there, county bailiff is there. If you need assistance, then you would think that you would call the sheriff's department, but they, in this situation, called DPD. And so as it relates to body cam footage, there's not really anything on the books right now about that. But if you want to be responsive to the people, if you want to make sure that the people's issues are being heard and body camera footage being released is something that's going to be a part of that, then I think we do need to have a policy on paper. We do need to have something that says, when these things are happening and we want to know what happened, there's questions on both sides about what went on, then yeah, we need to release that footage. And so that's what I think. And I think Malachi hit the nail on the head in terms of it's about how you do things, right? If ICE is going into communities, there's, people wearing masks, there's people with guns, there's, all these sirens and noise, and, you don't necessarily know if they have a warrant. Somebody in the eviction situation, someone has now been killed. Like, what is going on? What is the way that how are we approaching our citizens when we do these types of things? That is only going to foment more fear. It's only going to foment more dissent between the people and the law enforcement agencies. It's only going to make things worse if we don't have those written policies. It's only going to make things worse if we don't know what to do in these types of situations. If we have conflict between what Kim Worthy is saying and what the people are saying, that's why policy is so important. We need to make sure that we have policies and protocols in place, because if not, people are just going to continue to get hurt. There's going to be more confusion. There's going to be more issues that take place, right? And so that's why I'm always on the side of having things written down and having a protocol of how we do things and having policies that are inclusive of what the people are feeling, because if not, we're just going to keep having these contentious situations in our communities, and that's not good for anybody.
So with that, we're going to close out this public comment, and this is a heavier one as it definitely touches into policy, protocols, relationships, what's been uplifted from the mayor and city council, and now that it's before us, and not just Detroit, but the nation itself. It's a lot to take into consideration for us as residents here in the city of Detroit. With that, Detroit is different. Always check us out, and we love the support as it's also been uplifted. A little bit of a summer hiatus, but we back. It's so much more to talk about and explore leading up through these elections. And through those elections, Malachi, new haircut, new look, and everything for it. Right? Ready for it.
You just had to mention it.
I had to. But let the people know, Bridge Detroit, what's happening over there and what people can be in store for.
Yeah, so we are doing summer forums. If you haven't come out already, please check our website for the calendar of events. We have a few more. We're talking to all of the at-large candidates, as well as a few more council districts. We are doing a event with the Parks Coalition as well to talk with the mayoral candidates about parks and green spaces across the city, which seems like a good topic for summer to me. Yeah, we are, we're here. We're covering these elections. I'm going to mayoral forums a couple times a week. You can find all that reporting on bridgedetroit.com. We have a new election tracker page. Instead of having to hunt down every headline, you can just keep clicking on that article and it will be updated with little news briefs throughout the campaign. I'm going to update it today probably, as well as our newsletters, which are, again, all this content is free. We appreciate any support you can offer, but it's always going to be free for folks. We don't have a paywall. My Wednesday newsletter covers city council meetings. There's always things in there that we're not able to talk about on this show because they are doing so much. And then, of course, listen to Detroit Next. That is our platform to interview candidates in long form discussion. We have basically talked to everybody at this point. So we've got a couple more episodes coming out. If you haven't made up your mind yet, this is a good way to compare candidates and really get into the weeds on the issues that they are knowledgeable about, and also see maybe where the gaps in their knowledge may lie. So thank you for Detroit is Different and Khary for working with us on that this year.
Thank you. And then when you talk about that Parks and that Parks Forum, we're going to be doing more with We Own Everything as well, because that day you're going to get a chance to give your voice, and that voice to Tegan Humphreys is not here, but y'all know Thomaesa. So Thomaesa, let the people know what's happening at We Own Everything.
Yeah, We Own Everything. We just out here being political, interacting with candidates. As Khary mentioned, on July 9th, we're going to be having a meet and greet with the D5 candidates at Cool Cities Park, which is going to be really great. We Own Everything will be on scene, interviewing candidates and just giving y'all more opportunities to hear from these candidates. So just trying to bring more political education, bring more access to the political activity that's happening in the city, and just happy to be a part of it.
All right. With that being said, this is another public comment. Thank you for checking.